basically what I see in both ends, in the attacking and in the defense side.
Is that there's a lot of decentralization of regulations.
I would say it highlight the usage of artificial intelligence,
You know, the best thing that some would say about North America is also one of the most challenging things.
technology, and artificial intelligence combined. It's crazy.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Signal Flow. I am your host for today, Ben Thomas. You know, as we talk about the world of IT and cybersecurity, I think we do a good job as a community of having conversations on a micro level and maybe talking about light infrastructure for, businesses and communities and products and things like that. But I want to have a conversation today geared around the more macro world of cybersecurity, specifically through the lens of what I would call critical infrastructure and government applications and things like utilities, and talk about how the larger cybersecurity trends are impacting our most critical infrastructure in some of our largest organizations, specifically here in the United States. I brought someone on to talk about that today who really could speak to that. Not only a trainer for cybersecurity, but also certified by a number of different organizations. And that's Felipe Costa of Moxa. Felipe, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for the invitation, Dan. I'm really excited for the conversation today.
Well, Felipe, I want to ask the first question here. And I think that, ironically enough, cybersecurity is you see the headline in all sorts of different news outlets and organizations, and you hear it about, you hear people talk about cyber attacks and EMP threats, which is a whole different conversation altogether. I recognize that. But, there's always this question of, as our governments and as our critical infrastructure and as our utilities and even some of our larger companies continue to drive, more adoption in the world of IT, data security, cybersecurity, access control are all conversations that we have to have as a community. And I wanted to ask, really, to start us off, how has that world evolved, right? Even post COVID, there's been this, it seems like, increase in hacking and cyber breaches and things like that. I want to ask, how has that world evolved in the last 5 years?
I believe you pretty much summarized the situation that we are. Historically, mission critical applications, like you just described, they are isolated. So we had our own standalone applications working, and suddenly we have a lot of new applications, IIoT 4.0, and many others, just opening doors, basically. So what you just described is the situation that have been putting our networking, our critical infrastructure in place, because we need to do a lot of things like you just described, artificial intelligence, enhancement of performance. Now we are dealing with the same problems that IT have been dealing for the past years. So basically, this is the summary for bringing the industry in the level that we are.
Well, Felipe, on a high level too, obviously North America has its own subset of standards, and you look in places like Europe that have GDPR compliance and all sorts of some privacy restrictions. At a high level, how does North America differ maybe from the rest of the world with some of the requirements from a cybersecurity standpoint?
I would say the particularity that we have here is how complex it is to manage and put together the different states, and even the verticals. In other countries and even continents that you just described, somehow it's easier. Although they have their own challenge. But you just mentioned about Europe, South America, and many other countries. They were able, at least in national level, to have a specific standard to frame the mission critical applications. Here in the US, the challenge is we don't have it done yet in the national level, in the federal level. We have some states, California, for example, where we are here at Moxa, and some other states working in, let's say, in certain levels of protection. But when it comes in mission critical, it's really complex. Each state has their own regulations, and even the verticals, power, NERC, and maybe oil and gas, they have a different one. So I believe our challenge here in Americas is pretty much how to have a frame or a same consolidation of standards that we don't have yet. We have many ways, many solutions, many discussions, but it's hard to come up with a single place, honestly. So this is the big challenge here.
Well, that's interesting, right? And North America is a lot of things, and hub for a lot of different industries and conversations, and freedoms that you would even say for some people. But one of the challenges, as you mentioned, is that there's a lot of decentralization of regulations, and especially as companies are sort of based in different states and locations, those requirements change, right? I remember pretty vividly. I believe it was 7 or 8 years ago when Europe rolled out the privacy and GDPR compliance, and every single email address that I had ever subscribed to, or every single email provider I'd ever subscribed to, had to send me a notification and let me know that they were collecting my data, right? And the best thing that some would say about North America is also one of the most challenging things. But I want to ask, outside of even just the standards and regulations, what are some of the common challenges that larger organizations and critical infrastructure have from a cybersecurity standpoint? Is it hardened technology? Is it knowledge? What are some of the common challenges?
You definitely pointing for the most important ones. I would say technology limitation. As you can imagine, we have applications running for more than 15 years, 20 years, and they are still good. No plans for refurbishment or anything else, so they are still there. And so, how we basically bring these old fashion that technologies to the nowadays challenge and all of that. So definitely put security in this old technology is one of the main challenges. We call legacy. So legacy is definitely one of the big challenges. And also the transition that we are doing nowadays, basically with IT and OT technology. You pointed in our beginning of the conversation, a lot of AEEE, authentication, many other, let's say, IT words are coming place now in OT. So definitely there is a gap of knowledge still in OT that definitely the industry is catching up. But definitely, I would agree with you that these two would be the biggest ones in terms of the challenge that the US. And to be honest, I have been dealing with applications in Europe and still in Latin America. All of those, they are facing somehow the same challenge: people, knowledge plus technology, how we can combine this. It's a big thing nowadays.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times when you talk about cybersecurity and privacy, people automatically go to the cloud, right? And, making sure that you can't social engineer a password and all these sorts of different things. But, there's a massive element of hardware to it. And I know that's one of the places that you guys specialize at Moxa. And, you and I had the chance to originally meet at a critical infrastructure conference. And I would say from a hardware perspective, a lot of times that differs pretty dramatically from what I would call traditional AV, whether it's switches or infrastructure. What are some of the hardware challenges and hardware differences that you see when it comes to things like securing critical infrastructure and mission critical operations versus maybe traditional conference room type applications or local type security applications?
I would call it like the concept itself. Mission critical applications, they are running and in a very, let's say, hard environment. So vibration, shock, dust, and many other things, even electrical and magnetic interference, for example, in some power applications. So we have all of that around outside the fact that you need to transmit data like in IT rooms, right? So you combine the challenge of communication because IT has their own challenge, but on the top of that, you also have the environment around. So imagine now you put all these sophisticated technology features that we're calling, trying to track threats, advanced threats in a hardware that is really limited because you need to certify. Everything is really calculated in a bit. You need to make sure the dissipation, the heat dissipation is fine, the processing, all of that. So when it comes basically in missile critical applications, everything is really designed. There is no space, there is no buffer, to be honest. So the big challenge that the industry in general faced in the past years was pretty much redesign all the hardware that we have been dealing. So I cannot use anymore the hardware that I've been using for 15 years. So Moxa specifically, that I can speak with more knowledge. Basically, we had to redesign our new families, our new series. They are pretty much built from scratch. New software, new hardware to really make sure that our platform could endurance for years. and add as needed all the security features and make sure we are too good in terms of all the other aspects that I just explained: vibration, uh, electromagnetic interference, and all of that. So this is a big challenge, to be honest.
Well, I'm curious too, and this is something that we typically see more in the professional and commercial AV side of things. There's we talk a lot about what the convergence of the IT and the AV world and the IT and the facilities world. And when you look at some of these critical infrastructure builds, there is sometimes a knowledge gap between what I would say the operational technology folks and the people who use the technology on a day-to-day basis and the IT folks. What are some of the common challenges, especially in sort of the critical infrastructure world, that, is the operational technology team having to learn more and take on more accountability from the infrastructure and IT infrastructure standpoint? Or are you seeing the IT folks having to take on more load and more weight and more responsibility outside of their core disciplines? Are you seeing a little bit of both?
Yeah, honestly, there is a little bit of both around. It's more like a strategic decision for the company side. So, big companies usually, what I have been seeing, they are trying to combine the departments because definitely there is a lot of discussions and challenge because by nature the technologies are really different and the challenges are really different. So, when just bring an example from classes and applications, the first thing that we need to align is uh, you need to understand the challenge that IT has, and you need to understand the challenge that OT has. So basically, the common understanding of the challenge are the opening the door for the conversation. But putting that aside, basically, what's happening is um, all the big companies, they are trying to facilitate that communication. So they are building basically corporation departments. The name may differ, but definitely the idea behind is I have OT and IT uh, colleagues work in the same department, not anymore IT or just OT. So the big companies, I'm seeing more that direction, but definitely it differs. So basically, small medium companies, I have seen a lot of IT take over because security basically started with IT technology, right? So basically, if you see NSA documents before even the internet came in place, they were disclosing about, hey, internet, there is a lot of security flaws. You need to use encryption because there is no easy way to really protect information. So it borns with security. OT, it was like availability. I need to make my production. I need to make sure I'm delivering the goods. And if something stops, I need to go there and make it recover it as soon as possible. So the mindset, it's completely different. So definitely, when small companies bring IT in place, they have all the knowledge already in mind. But the challenge is I cannot really deploy IT security right away in OT because we will face a lot of problems and even incidents. So yeah, maybe another topic, but definitely this is commonplace. The standards, 6043, for example, it helps to make this conversation a little bit easier. But yeah, this is the big thing. Depends on the size.
Well, and it's a good point too, right? I would loop. Some people disagree, but I would loop manufacturing into critical infrastructure, right? And I love that you brought up, that point where something as simple as a firewall or an incorrect subnet or domain address can shut down production of a manufacturing plant altogether, or an oil and gas refinery. And it sounds so silly and it sounds so basic, but you know I want to ask too, we talk about kind of the humans on both sides of the world, right? And obviously, we have things like AI that are constantly helping us, proactively address a lot of these solutions. But how much of these challenges that pop up are what I'll call human generated, right? Maybe it's an education gap, maybe it's somebody installed the technology incorrectly. How often do you find that humans typically are on some level responsible for a lot of these operational inefficiencies or even breaches?
You got it. Definitely, the challenges are everywhere. Let's say IT, they are a little bit more mature because definitely, like I explained, they have been done for forever. That so it pretty much you can put anywhere inside OT you find a challenge. So people definitely because OT by standard they were looking for basically how I create my production and keep it running. So now I need to take care about authentication in not clicking in links. So it's something basic for IT, but definitely it was not the reality. I definitely can share about that because I have like 20 years just in OT space. So I have been trying to hike this journey from OT and gaining knowledge about IT technology. So definitely, I understand. It's clear. OT, we in the past we are not really paying attention in this aspect. So definitely we have a lot of challenge in OT, let's say training and etc. So and it's funny, I would say, because the companies also think that just one training would be enough. And again, we have many standards, but all of them they will point the importance to have training and often, right? Not just once, because definitely it's not even linked with the education. I have been joining conversations where CEOs have been actually being used by hackers to gain access to the company. So this is another misunderstanding. It's not just OT, but the company holistically need to take care about education of their employees. Anyone can be, like you said, explore. Even myself, I receive every day somebody trying to get my credentials. So yeah, all of us, it's our day basically.
Well, it's interesting too, and I the reason I bring up kind of the human factor is I think something like 60 to 75% of breaches are on some level caused by something like social engineering, or somebody gave up a password or didn't secure it. And that is the constant battle that we face, right? We can have incredible infrastructure, we can have, meaningful setups and IT infrastructure built, but at the end of the day, if your CEO, if your executive team clicks a link that they shouldn't click, that could shut everything down, right? That sounds so simple, but what are some of the ways that you could prevent against that from the social engineering and human side?
Absolutely. Technology plays a very important role here, right? I would say we can find in many numbers about breeds and all of that. So historically, what I have been seeing is technology is where hackers are going to start first, even before humans are exploring credentials, because it's easy. I have a lot of open protocols. I'm pointing before answer this first question. I'm just trying to elaborate a little bit more on the other one.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
it. I love it.
So even technology, for me, in my experience with other colleagues in the area, they always try to explore the weak protocols. So we have many like Telnet, many devices already exposed in the internet. I even don't need to send a link. I just can track IP, and with this protocol enabled, I have the access. So this is the weakest link, in my opinion. So after we cover the technology, we call basically we close our attack surface. We minimize our attack surface, closing all these door protocols and use it. All of that, the basic one, the hardening. Humans, in my opinion, will be the second link that the hackers are going to try to explore. So to help in considering the company is already mature enough that they did the basic, the hardening, they closed all the easiest paths to their infrastructure. The second one basically would be human beings. If you see many of the most important attacks in US, somehow they explored the human being factor, spear phishing, many other variations of phishing, right? But basically trying to take advantage from the human inability to recognize the attack. So basically, I would say for that type of specific outside the training, but we are training. Everyone knows that we need to train the people when you're still having this type of attack, right? So I would say outside combined with the training, that should be something constant. We should combine the technology. So we have a lot of technology to make it harder. So MFA, that we call multi authentication factor. Um, it's one way to make harder external access to our network. So definitely the simple way to summarize my opinion would say combine the training because I need to understand the implications of my actions. And if I don't really pay attention what I'm doing, I definitely can bring a lot of damage to the community, according the place I'm working with. So outside the training, the technology, understand and have a people with knowledge to really help pick the right technology. It's not just technology, but the right technology for your challenge. Let's say it's my way to say it.
Felipe, probably a lot of the listeners to this conversation right now may live more in the world of what I would say corporate or commercial AV, right? And they're not always working on critical infrastructure projects with utilities or government organizations, but oftentimes they find themselves needing to secure things like, healthcare networks or education or higher education networks or, companies and things like that might not necessarily qualify as critical infrastructure. But what are some of the best practices that those IT folks and those infrastructure folks can gain from the world of that critical and mission critical environment?
Sure, Ben. Absolutely. When it comes in place of good practices, we learn a lot with IT. But definitely, the first things that we try to do in a new network, basically hardening, is basically one of the first things that we try to understand. What are, but I'll say I'm going to take a one step back. Definitely, the first thing before even let's talk about hardening, it's risk assessment. This is bystander 643, for example, one of the frame that is gaining a lot of attraction in the world. They recommend basically you understand your risks. So coming from IT, they are really mature in sensing what are their most critical assets. But definitely, would be the first thing. Uh, as soon as you understand what are your critical assets, definitely after that you can start with the, let's call the good practice, basically hardening, basically close the doors that you don't need to use, absolute training, what is the audience and what they need to understand about their role inside the system. And after that, absolutely how the technology plays, and which type of technology you're going to use. And even with the past years, the usage of artificial intelligence, how we can gain more insights for production and for cybersecurity perspective, how we can help understand and see, anticipate basically threats in our networking. So definitely all of that, I would say there is even less nowadays. Basically, this discrepancy per se in terms of what OT and IT they are discussing. I see a lot of matching nowadays. We used to in the past, like I'm already in the cybersecurity community 15 years ish. So 15 years ago, we used to say we had like 28% overlap. So 8% what OT used to use or used to recommend. It was pretty much related to IT. Nowadays, this number is basically 90%. So I'm seeing more and more these correlation and connection. So honestly, I don't see anything that would say it's just an IoT, something really new, because definitely security is security. And I believe what changed basically are the challenge in each side.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I love that takeaway. Really, that we've got to be more collaborative, right? I think that's a really nice takeaway from that world of critical infrastructure because even in a commercial infrastructure or sorry, a commercial installation, it's important for the IT teams to talk with executive leadership and their operational teams and make sure that they're aligned on some of those visions. And Felipe, I want to ask, and we'll wrap with this. You talked about being in the cybersecurity world for 15, 20 years, and it feels like every single day the world evolves more rapidly than it used to, right? Our technological cycles are far quicker than they used to be. So I want to ask, where do you anticipate, or even what are some of the threats that you anticipate, coming out maybe in the next, 3 to 5 years that folks really should keep an eye out for?
I would say it highlight the usage of artificial intelligence. It's not my thought. Definitely, U.S. Defense Department, they have been pointing these, let's say, sophistication of the attacks just gain attraction in the world, and a lot of that in the past to really do a hacking in a mission critical infrastructure, you had to have a good knowledge about it. Nowadays, you don't need it more. You have a lot of tools already developed, deep web, and all these, let's say, hot words that we are pretty familiar with. And all of that basically is supporting have a very sophisticated type of attacks without any specific knowledge, honestly. So basically, what I see in both ends, in the attacking and in the defensive side, the usage of artificial intelligence would be a huge thing. I don't see in the future company without using in the defensive side artificial intelligence survive too long, because definitely the attraction and how they are evolving the hacking side, using the technology and artificial intelligence combined, it's crazy. So definitely, my takeaway is definitely we don't need to rely, and we should not rely just in technology, like I explained, in terms that we need to understand our risks, business, critical assets, but definitely also we understand this part, technology plays a very important role. So because without knowing the risk, we don't know exactly what you need and which technology will be most efficient. So definitely, I'd say work hand by hand. Technology, understand the risks, plus you knowing your business. So this is, I believe, will be for the OT perspective, where we are evolving and learning to understand with business, IT, and also be prepared. But definitely, the guys on the other side, they're not playing. They are doing really aggressive in terms of the usage of artificial intelligence. So we need to be aware of that. That is not just like a sales pitch. Uh, it's happening everywhere. So, but we need to be smart. So, what I'm trying definitely pointing out here, it's a combination of actions that should be done. Right, technology, definitely knowing your business, your critical assets, so you can prioritize budget, for example, is a big thing in anywhere. That is just a funny, I know that we are just finished, but I remember joke, because when I start to join the OT events in cybersecurity, the folks usually share, yeah, who has the money is IT. But when I start to join the IT events, the guys used to share, who has the money is OT. So that's funny, because nobody really believes, but all of us, we have a challenge with budget and where implement the right security. So definitely understanding where we have our critical assets plus the right technology, you be the huge thing for the future, in my opinion, Ben.
Well, Felipe, I love that you touched on budget there at the end, because that's the great equalizer. That's the common challenge that I think every industry we continue to face is, look, figure out how to do more with less, and we'll make it happen. Hey, I know that there may be some people out there listening who have some questions. How can people reach out to you?
Absolutely. I will share my mail. So basically, my corporate mail is Felipe.Costa, so FLAPE.COSTA at moxa.com. But I also make sure I will share with all of you my LinkedIn profile, uh, and my phone. So more than glad to engage with you and any of our listeners to support and have discussions about cybersecurity and mission critical applications.
Well, look, Felipe, we appreciate you coming on today and having this conversation with us, right? Especially in the world of critical infrastructure, it's important for us across all sorts of technology communities to have these conversations across verticals and across applications. And I thank you for coming on today to have that conversation.
Thank you for the invitation, Ben. I really enjoyed. I love talking about cybersecurity, and I hope to see you soon in the next opportunity talking again about it.
Well, absolutely. We'll find an excuse to have you back on the show. And we also appreciate you all for tuning in today. Thank you so much for watching Signal Flow. Be sure to stay tuned for our next episode.